Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. I'm Ani Anderson.
And I'm Brian Trzaskos. Join us as we explore the science
and art of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools.
Strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional.
Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence.
If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. Hey there, Brian. How are you?
Hey, Ani, how are you?
Good. What's so funny?
Live long and prosper. That's like just popped into my head right before we started the podcast.
Okay.
There was that, well, it was Spock. Spock from Star Trek would say, live long and prosper. And he could do that with his hands.
It's a little bit before my time.
Can you do that? No, I can do it with both sides.
I can do it.
Can you do it?
I can. No,
Yeah.
I can't. I used to be able to.
There you go. Yeah. So you got.
It's before my time a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit before your time.
Spock.
Stuff. Live long and prosper. So, okay. So you might be like, what just happened at the start of this podcast? We're talking about longevity today. It's actually kind of a pretty cool topic. I've been interviewed on some other podcasts about this topic recently.
You've been interviewed about longevity?
Yeah. And I thought that let's talk about it on our podcast. I think it'd be kind of fun.
Okay.
Because it's not something that we have talked about, I don't think, yet in our 100 and something, 50, 40 episodes.
5 episodes.
Something like that.
Yeah. Why are people asking you about longevity?
Well, it's a thing.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
how do you live? How do you live longer? How do you live not only longer, but how do you live better?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think
we're living longer, all right.
I think we figured out how to live longer. The whole era of pharmaceutical medicine over the last couple of decades has helped keep people alive longer. But isn't it interesting, like even with those pharmaceuticals that have kept people alive longer, we're still like inundated with all these chronic diseases that people experience that don't make living longer necessarily living better.
Sure.
So there's kind of a movement now towards, wait a second, let's kind of pull back all the living longer stuff and how can we live longer better? And I thought, let's talk about this idea through the lens of the work we do, right, with somatics and somatic coaching, because I think there's a role to play in somatic and somatic coaching, especially if you look at longevity research, which I thought would be interesting to kind of chat about. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like 70s, the new 60, and 80s, the new 70. And I think there's really something to that from some of the older people specifically in my life and looking at what 80 looks like now, or 70 looks like now, or 60 looks like now, and what I remember used to look like when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do think that in general, maybe it's people I'm noticing. I notice a lot of thriving.
I was just listening to a podcast recently, and I can't remember what podcast it was, and I don't remember who the researcher was on the podcast, but I remember what he said. So he was a longevity researcher, and he said that actually can you guess what the most productive decade of your life, of people's lives is?
Right now it feels like 40, but I'm in my 40s.
70.
Really?
Your 70s is the most productive.
I would not have thought that.
And then the second most productive is your 60s. And the third most productive is your 50s.
What do they mean by productive?
Getting stuff done. Building things, creating things, like living what you would call a productive life.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, whoa. So That's what we're speaking to. So I think it must have been a podcast, something on longevity or longevity research, because that's what they were talking about. And I thought, well, that's kind of a pretty cool statistic.
Yeah.
Right? Because these are also the times where if you've raised kids, the kids are out of the house.
And
supporting themselves. Certainly by the time someone's 70 years old, they have a lot less obligation and a lot more choice about where they place there. And we have people in our community that, I would say their 70s and their 80s have been very productive ages. They've built nonprofits, multiple nonprofits. They've raised a ton of money for like animal shelters, traveling and hospice, or traveling the world, those kinds of things.
Involve with their families.
Yeah, but in order to do that stuff, you got to be healthy.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's not just living to that age. You got to be healthy. at those ages in order to do that. And so that's been
Hmm.
certainly, I haven't spoken about this a lot, like out loud, but this is something I think about a lot.
You speak about it in your head.
I speak it in my head a lot, yeah, about this idea of being healthy longer to be able to just, live a full life,
I think
And
about
you've
it
talked
too,
about
a
this, you actually
lot.
talk about this, at least in our kitchen, about the important for this for you.
Yeah, well, I think about it a lot. One of my main goals in life is to be a healthy 80-year-old.
Mm,
I want to be a healthy 80-year-old so that my kids have the freedom to have as much freedom as possible in their middle-aged life because I know how busy being middle-aged feels. No matter what path they choose, I want them to have more freedom and not have to think about me as much as possible. I know the healthier I am now and continue to be and think about that, the less kind of burden it'll be on them. But also,
mm,
I want to enjoy my life when I'm 60, 70, 80,
mhm.
even 90. And I know that thinking about that ahead of time is where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just kind of look at what are what's some research around longevity, and then how does the work we do here at the Somatic Coaching Academy kind of help fuel that, or can help people live better longer? So I'm sure lots of our listeners have read the book Blue Zones. And so it's a book, it's actually pretty cool, right? So the researchers and the authors who wrote the book partnered with National Geographic photographers and producers of things and looked around the world at what societies seem to naturally live the longest. And then they went in there and kind of reverse engineered, like, well, why do they think that was happening? What was going on? And then even further, some of the work that is hopefully going to be done is they'll take those learnings and then recreate and restructure Western civilization to model these environments or communities that actually naturally help promote longevity, which I think is a pretty cool thing.
Good luck, and
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. So there are like these nine things. There's these nine things that encourage longevity. These 9 points. We'll go through them really quickly and kind of just chat about them. But the first one is to move naturally. So people in these environments, they move naturally. So they're not pumping iron, right? They're not lifting weights, like going to the gym and lifting weights, which are things that, we do or I do. They're not like getting on machinery to exercise, which is things that I do. So these are some of the things I have to kind of think about changing for myself. But they do things where they move naturally. So they do a lot of like gardening, where they're squatting, twisting, turning, moving. But we don't have a dishwasher, which I'm really proud of in the house
We don't.
because the people in these communities don't use these modern conveniences. They actually have to walk or
You have
somehow
to do
carry. You
something.
have to walk, carry, lift,
Yeah.
move in natural environments.
Which is how you move naturally.
Moving naturally, right? So you're getting on the
You have
ground, you're
a
rolling
reason.
around. You're not just sitting in a chair all day long,
Right.
right? So sitting kind of is the new smoking in a lot of ways. And so moving naturally is really, really important. So
Hmm.
how can we do that more regularly is kind of a cool thing to kind of consider, moving naturally. Now, I will say, well, that's going to come back when we do the second part of our talk
Okay.
about moving naturally.
All right. So get rid of your dishwasher next.
Get rid of your dishwasher, get rid of your laundry machine, your washing machine, get out there,
Snip your own grass with
start
scissors.
snipping your grass with scissors and pounding your clothes at the riverside with a rock. Okay. So the next thing is purpose. So people in these communities have a natural sense of purpose. So like in Okinawa and Sardinia and where else? There's some other the places that they've identified. I'm not going to list all of them, or maybe only just a couple of them. Right? Okinawa is one. Sardinia is one. There's a place in California. I don't remember the name of the town of California that actually falls into this list. There's 8 primary places around the globe that they found kind of match these parameters for that have more people over 100 years old than any place else, like per capita. Like that's how they kind of decided, like, what are these blue zones? The most centenarians per capita live there. Okay, so purpose. So people have purpose. They have a reason for living, for being, for acting, for moving forward. They have a very strong connection to purpose. Which again, okay, so just kind of bookmark these things, and then as we talk about Somatic Coaching Academy, so somatic work, you get an idea of why this stuff fits in.
My grandmother passed away, was it 2 years ago now? And I'm so bad with numbers. I don't remember how old she was, but I think she was 98. And I said to her, "What's the secret of a long life?" Like the last time I saw her where she could talk to me, and she said, "Keeping busy."
Did she? Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah. But I mean, she was the kind of person who, as long as she possibly could, was in her garden and
Hmm.
cooking and things like that. Not just from a standpoint of not having a dishwasher and natural movement, but for purpose. Like she felt purpose to wake up in the morning and take care of her home and her
Hmm.
food and to cook local food and to be cooking from her garden and making things beautiful. Like she took a lot of purpose in that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, okay. What else we got? Downshift is another one. So the downshift is basically managing stress, learning how to consciously and consistently downshift your nervous system out of what we call sympathetic dominance into more parasympathetic dominance and a balanced nervous system. Every one of these cultures does that regularly, downshifts their nervous system out of chronic stress states. Um, One of my favorite ones, this is one I try to do, right? The 80% rule. In other words, when you're eating,
Stop at
stop
80%.
at
No
80%.
way they
If
did
you
that.
do not, yeah, so
Oh,
that's a
that's
trait.
oh,
That's a
that's so
trait of people
funny.
who live consistently past 100 years old.
You do a great job with this.
Part of their culture is like stop eating at
Stop
80%.
when you're
Do
80%,
not
not when you're
overfeed yourself,
full.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's a thing. So I try to really
So
practice that one as much as I can. I can always be better at it, but that's an important one, I think.
yeah, you're so much better at that than me. You know, we'll be at your mom's house for pasta, for sauce, for Nona's
Sauce.
sauce. And you'll be like, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm at 80%. And I just can't help it. One more spoonful of
81,
pasta.
82,
And then
83,
there's
100.
and then there's dessert.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then 110%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
Just
good.
like how things taste in
Mhm.
my mouth.
Yeah. So, okay, so the next one is they call it plant slant. So where your diet is primarily plant-based diet
I look
and
forward to getting
only
back to
meat
that.
a couple of times a week. But
They don't have teenage
right now, our teenage boy is like, "What do you want for dinner?" Steak,
steak, meat.
meat,
It's
steak.
got to be
He gets up for
red
a,
meat.
I'm not kidding, he gets up for a midnight snack and he makes himself a pound of ground beef.
Yeah, the teenage influencers, the young 20 influencers are really pushing the red meat right now because he's not the only one. Like young men are really, real. Maybe they always have been. I don't know, but right now the young men are really into the red meat, and we're like really excited to get back to more
We're really ready to
plant-based.
not eating as much red meat in the house. So that's like,
Ay.
so yeah, we're really looking forward to kind of moving back towards kind of that plant slant.
Yeah, we got into eating more meat as a family because we really took into consideration a farm-based diet,
Yeah.
which I just think is interesting, which is why I bring it up. We live in a place where there's a lot of farms, there's CSAs, a lot of people
A
belong to
lot of
CSAs,
hyper local food. Yeah.
hyper local food. And so we, for a very long time, belonged to a full diet year-round CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. We basically like bought in at a farm and we would go there every week and get food. And when you do that kind of thing, depending on the farm you're at, but at this farm that we were at, that had a whole diet CSA. There's meat and there's grains and there's veggies
Dairy and
and dairy.
raw dairy,
We
which we still
actually,
get and love.
I started eating
Yep.
way more meat when I started eating hyper local. It doesn't have to be like that, because we can like put up food and things.
Right.
But
Of course, it
anyway,
was really high quality grass fed meat
super,
too.
super
So
good.
it's not
Right.
mass produced. And we were feeding three kids and putting up a lot of food. And we
Yep.
were actually kind of in this seasonal diet where all summer long we'd be getting inundated with food and we'd put it
Put
up,
stuff in
can
it.
it, freeze it, and then we'd eat that food all year long. On this farm-based diet, to your point, which I thought was really good. I mean,
Yeah, I
I really
really
enjoyed that.
enjoyed it. And as we're both getting older, we're both craving having less of the meat
Yep,
now.
less meat, more veg,
Mhm.
yeah, sort of thing. Anyway, so that's plant slant. Okay, so a lot of you are going to be excited to hear this one. They call it wine at five, which means that not all these communities do this. One of them, the one in Sardinia, I think, really kind of digs into this, where they do a happy hour at 5 o'clock, like every day, and have one one to two glasses of wine.
Is it red or white?
I didn't read into
Oh,
that,
okay.
right?
I
So,
was just
so I don't
curious.
know. But so what the research says is that a minimal to moderate consumption of alcohol may be helpful for that. And what they'd say is, though, you can't save it up till to the end of the week and have 14 glasses on Saturday. Then that does not work.
And
So,
1 to 2 glasses.
right. But one of these communities doesn't drink at all, and they still have over the 100
Oh,
centenarians.
okay.
So
It's not
it's not like
necessarily
you
one to
have to do
one.
all, it's not like you have to do all of these.
Sure.
These are just the things that happen. But some people are like, they lean into the wine at five, like really big.
Yeah.
And they're like, but they don't move naturally. They don't downshift. They don't plant slant. They don't 80% sort of thing. So in that case, it's probably not going to help you live that long because there is other research to say that even moderate alcohol consumption gives you literally zero benefit to health and longevity at all, and potentially a downside to it.
Right. And some people listening to this are very happy about it because they like their wine.
Yeah.
We
So,
don't really drink, so that one doesn't cue in with us. Do they have a coffee at 9 or something? Did they say anything about coffee?
well,
I
they
know you
do
like your
they do
coffee.
have a belonging category. Like you have to feel like you belong.
Okay, but that goes
So,
with the wine
yeah,
too. Like it
right.
doesn't say coffee.
So
Do
belong.
you feel like you belong with coffee? Is that what you're
When
saying?
I'm drinking coffee with people, certainly, I certainly feel like I belong. But they say belonging, and so they actually link this into kind of faith-based communities more than anything else. But like people who meet regularly, like in
Okay.
kind of like a belonging network that
Sure.
have a shared faith or shared belief system. That sense of belonging definitely fosters longer life, right?
Yeah, I remember when I was studying hospice patients as a graduate student, that was one of the things that I think prolonged people's lives even when they were dying was the belonging and the sense of connection.
Yeah, yeah. So
Does
that's
that have anything to do with spouses and partners?
That's kind of the next one.
Okay.
The next category they have is called loved ones first. And what it means is that people have a strong connection to their families, to their either their children or their parents or grandparents, and committed partners.
So that didn't go with belonging. That was different.
Yeah,
So
belonging
belonging
is
is more about
more of a
community.
community kind of thing. Yeah, a faith-based
Mhm.
or a belief-connected kind of community where people would meet regularly. That went under belonging, and the loved ones first was more about family, committed partnerships,
Hmm.
those sorts of things. So that's another two separate
Interesting.
categories.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
which could overlap,
Sh-
I assume,
Sure.
but they could overlap. And then the third category is called right tribe. So what that mean, which you might think, well, what's the difference between that and belonging? Well, right
Right.
tribe are um, it's not only the people that you share like your specific belief system with, but it's the larger community that you live in and their habits and practices that they do. So, do the people in your community walk regularly, or
Oh,
do they
okay.
drive places regularly? Do the people in your community, eat more plants, or do they
That
eat
makes a
more
lot of
meat? The
sense.
people in your community, do they do more
That's
health-driven
interesting.
practices? Is like that, what's more socially acceptable? Like, what are the
Right.
social
Right.
drivers within the tribe?
Huh.
That's kind of the
Mm.
idea. And so, does the community within, do they smoke? Are you spending time in bars, or are you spending time at the gym or the health club kind of thing? So that's kind of more the right tribe. It's kind of like, it's not only your specific kind of belief focused community, but it's also the environment that you place yourself in. Like, what are the people around you doing? And
Yeah.
these communities, these 8 kind of blue zones across the world, all have kind of the shared idea of their health-based cultures. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's really what they're kind of focused on and working in. So when I
Right.
travel around the country, it's always interesting. Um, like I've been in New Orleans, and I don't think New Orleans is going to be upset by me saying this because every year they get rated as the least healthy city in the country in the U.S. And when I go to New Orleans, like I don't see anybody out there jogging, but I see a lot of people stumbling around from the night before, like hungover. There's a lot of alcohol consumption. There's amazing food. Like the food in New Orleans is
Right.
incredible.
Yeah.
So rich and fatty and fried. Oh my God, it's great. But then you go to places, like, well, like Fort Lauderdale, when we would work a lot in Fort Lauderdale,
Always
people
somebody
out there
running.
running all of the time.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of partying in Fort Lauderdale too, but there's also like a lot of activity, a lot of health generated kind of activity there too.
Yeah.
San Diego's the same kind of thing. Go to San Diego, there's a lot of people active kind of people.
Yeah.
So depending on where you, Denver, I lived in Denver for a long time, and
Very
Boulder,
close to
which
the
is
ocean.
why one of the reasons I moved there, because it's a lot of activity, a lot of health conscious, a lot of fitness and sport and that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah, the culture, right? I'm thinking about your parents who are snowbirds, so they leave New York and go down to Florida in the wintertime, and the community down in Florida is always doing
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
They're just really active. And in contrast here, where people basically in New York, people just kind of stay in their own homes.
In the wintertime, yeah.
Well, even, yeah, but even in the summertime, it's not like the neighbors are all interacting with each other or whatever. But in Florida, all the neighbors are interacting with each other. And this, I mean, that's belonging too. But like, again, culture, like what are people doing? It's just really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So those are the eight, those are like the kind of the nine areas of these blue zone traits that help people foster longevity. So I thought we'd just kind of segue into kind of some of the work we do here at the Somatic Coaching Academy. But I do want to know that all nine of those traits, right? All nine of those traits, move naturally, purpose, downshift, 80%, plant slant, wine at five, belonging, love one first, and right tribe. None of those have anything to do with like genetic engineering.
Yeah, all right. That's
You
true.
know, because there's a whole thing right now. Oh, we're going to genetically engineer away disease. We're going to start to do genetic modifications. And I'm not saying that that stuff's not valuable, that right now they're working on genetic engineering and gene modification for things like Alzheimer's disease and Lewy body syndrome, like these really devastating diseases. Sure. But we also know there are things like these nine traits that when people do these regularly, they're less likely to have those problems. So I just think it's interesting that, isn't it interesting as humans, we'll invest a ton of resources into like genetic engineering or pharmaceuticals to try to minimize the effects of things that we're doing to ourselves.
Yep.
I just want to point that out. Like as humans, we're really, really good at that. For some reason, rather than just changing our behavior and changing our behavior to have healthier lifestyles, we'd rather spend all kinds of resources and money to try to affect the symptoms of what we're doing to hurt ourselves.
Right.
I don't know.
Counteract the symptoms. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just putting that out there. And that leads then into our, what we do here at the Somatic Coaching Academy. So if you've been listening to us for any amount of time, there's like three primary tools that three primary processes, I guess, that we use here at the Somatic Coaching Academy, where we have core centering is kind of, that's our level one certification program, but we have core centering classes that we do regularly that people can come to. First month's free. So you can join in for those and try those things out. These are things that we do in all of our group programs and even with our private clients. Okay. So core centering, this it really kind of locks into this downshift trait. That's really what it does. So when we're doing core centering, we are actively and consciously downshifting the nervous system, moving it from sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic or towards parasympathetic dominance, looking to balance the nervous system so that the neurophysiological and neuroendocrine profiles optimize for someone and stop creating inflammation, stop creating chronic tension, stop creating all the disease processes that would decrease longevity. So the thing is just bringing your nervous system into a state of balance by itself is longevity producing, right? It creates longevity in that way.
And it feels good.
And it feels really good. Yeah, you just did a core centering class with our
I did.
folks this morning, right?
I was led through one of our core centering classes with one of our amazing teachers. They're so good. They're so great.
Yeah.
The hardest part is getting to them because we just get wrapped up in life and forget how important it is. But it's like that's the hardest part, which is crazy because they feel so good. You feel good while you're doing it. You feel
Mhm.
good after you did it. You feel good because you did it. Yeah,
And it can help you live longer and better, apparently, from what we're looking at in the research, right? You just
fantastic.
have to have a way to do it. The one other thing that, right, core centering practices are really helpful for is just the idea of breath capacity. Can we just talk about that just for a moment?
That's
So, in
important.
the Framingham Heart Study, which is like a 60 or 70 year long longitudinal study of cardiac risk, like why people would die of heart disease, which by the way is the leading cause of death in Western countries is heart disease. One of the findings they had in that study is that your vital breath capacity is the most accurate indicator of how long you're going to live and how healthy you're going to be. It's longer and more. It's more accurate than your blood cholesterol levels. It's more accurate than your blood glucose levels or your blood sugar levels. It's more accurate than whether or not you smoke. Is your breath capacity. So the idea is, folks, is if you can just do things to enhance your breath capacity, that is directly linked to living longer and living better. Breath is life. Breath is life. And we're advocates of extending your breath capacity in gentle, consistent, meaningful ways. And you get all that with the core centering practices,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, core centering helps you to naturally release the tension that keeps your breath bound up. I think that's really important because it's not trying to push through. I mean, release the tension and it's
Release
already
the
there.
tension.
It's
Exactly.
waiting for you.
Yeah, and what happens when you release the tension in your body? Let's talk about all the effects of that. Well, when you release the tension in your body, you get better blood circulation. You breathe more deeply. Your neuroendocrine profiles optimize and normalize to actually bring you more vitality. To when you decrease tension in your body, more life energy flows through your body. Right? You just feel more alive. You feel better. Think about any time you've been tense or tight and how fatigued do you get? How tired do you get at the end of the day? You have a stressful day, your muscles are like knots and you're just exhausted. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't do anything today but just look at a computer all day and I was on meetings and I'm exhausted. And you didn't really exercise. So why are you exhausted? All the tension in your system.
I think this points to the purpose thing that you were talking about because when people live a life on purpose, they're able to go through their day with less tension,
Yeah.
actually. There's so much tension that is required to get ourselves to do things we don't want to do and don't feel aligned with and don't feel on purpose with every single day. It requires so much energy and tension and armoring to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So again, core centering, folks, all these things. Oh, here's another one, though, another really cool one is what we know, what somatic practices like core centering has been shown to enhance the life of what are called telomeres.
Right.
So telomeres are these little caps at the end of a DNA strand. So every time a cell in your body reproduces, and your cells reproduce, billions of times every day, your cells reproduce. Actually, every day you have billions of cells die and you have billions of cells reborn every day. So, but depending on how a cell reproduces is going to pass on to its offspring cell all of the current processing and operating system that it currently has going on. So that's why it's important to have a healthy cell because it'll pass on healthy information. If you have an unhealthy cell, it's going to pass on unhealthy information. It's like kind of passing the clipboard to the next person in line, sort of thing, with the operating procedures for what to do. So you want to have those healthy cells, but in either case, what happens is when a cell divides and multiplies, its DNA strands unwind, and then it reproduces, and then those DNA strands wind back together. Well, every time the DNA strands unwind, at the very ends of the strands are these what are called telomeres, and you lose a little bit of telomere every time they unwind, and then when they wind back together, like you get a new cell. But here's the thing. Every time they unwind, you lose a little bit more telomere. When there's no more telomeres at the end of the DNA strand, the cell can't reproduce anymore and it dies permanently. It can't reproduce again after that point in time, which means then you start to physically die more permanently. So when your telomeres are preserved at the end of your DNA strands, your cells can reproduce longer and more often, longer and more times. And we know that somatic practices actually preserve the telomeres at the end by actually producing an enzyme called telomerase, which actually supports the health of the telomeres. That's how it actually works. So I'm just saying, like, going deeper into why that downshift is so important with these practices that we're teaching you in core centering practices, they actually help to support the how many times your cells can replicate. Isn't that mind blowing, boggling something? It's just incredible, right?
Yeah, I think it's incredible that
Yeah.
you remember all of those things with
Yeah.
all the little
It's
details.
so cool. So cool. Okay. So just one more thing on the core centering stuff too. Um,
You
just
said that
one more thing.
three,
There's so
four
much. I'm
times.
trying to keep it short.
One more
I'm
thing.
trying to keep it
And
short, but
there's
there's
the
so many things. All right. So we also
really the
know
last
from
one.
research is that, and this isn't true just for core centering. This is true for lots of different somatic mindfulness practices. That what happens predictably after about 45 minutes of practice. Now, with that said, let me just caveat right here. There is some research to show that just if you are just starting a practice, just starting a mindfulness practice, 5 minutes of practice a day for 30 days shows a statistical improvement in your nervous system's shift into a parasympathetic state. Okay, so just 5 minutes a day for 30 days actually shows a statistical improvement to help you regulate your nervous system. Now, if you want to kind of go beyond that, when people practice somatic practices, predictively at about 45 minutes, people enter into an altered state of consciousness where you actually start to feel more connected to not just your local self, but more the universe at large. And you start to kind of commune with forces outside of yourself, greater forces, the universe. You can talk about this in a lot of different ways, but something changes after about 45 minutes. And this is a gateway, my friends. This is a gateway to the deeper behavior change that will help you to do more regular life practices that would help enhance your longevity. So you're not like popping the pills all the time to help you live longer. Your body's actually living longer on its own. But that takes behavior change, and the gateway to that behavior change happens at that 45-minute mark. That's when you actually can start to look at yourself not as like a local person, but you start to kind of look at yourself from the outside and notice those habitual patterns of behavior, and you can start to change and modify them at that point.
We've been doing a bunch of work on morning routines, and one of the things that I'm noting is 45 minutes is this benchmark, I think, for people to really feel like 45 minutes or more, to
Yeah.
feel like you really have a morning routine, you really have a practice. But less than that, if you do it for like 20 minutes or 25 minutes, it doesn't feel as meaningfully, like the gravitas of that practice just isn't there in the same way. If you've always wanted to feel what that feels like, I think you're bringing up a really good point. Shoot for 45 minutes, do that consistently, and you'll start to notice the shifts in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And on the way there, but here's the other thing we want to say is don't not do the practices if you can't do them for 45 minutes. Because doing
Absolutely.
them at all is better than not doing them.
Yep.
Right? So if you have 5 minutes, do 5 minutes. If you have 10, do 10 minutes. If you have 30, do 30 minutes. Like
And work on
keep
it
doing the practices. Keep doing the practices.
and keep expanding it.
And it might be if like one day a week you're like, oh, I have plenty of time today, I'm going to go a little bit longer, then try to go a little bit
Mm-hmm.
longer. But don't let yourself convince yourself that I
You
can't do it for
shouldn't do it.
45, so I'm not going to do it at all.
Yep.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Okay. So let's just talk about cross mapping really quick. So way back in earlier podcasts, we've talked all about cross mapping. This is our somatic transformation fundamentals program. We teach this primary skill. Again, we do this with our groups. So we do this with our private clients. So you get it whether you're in our certification programs or whether you're in our group programs. But one of the things that cross mapping really does is it helps to train you to recognize the subtle signs in your body that an imbalance is occurring,
Hmm.
that something is off, something is imbalanced. Because if we're talking about longevity, we're really talking about longevity it comes from a balanced physiological state. And that's not like a fixed state. It's dynamic, right? Because some days you're going to be a little more out of balance. Some days you're going to be more in balance. But the idea is on overall, like where are you overall in your physiological balance? If you're always on the edges and the extremes, that is not going to help support longevity. The more balanced your system is, the more and the more coherent your system is, the more you're going to have greater longevity in your life. And so when you have the ability to sense into the subtle things in your body, you're like, oh, something's a little off, then you can make adjustments. And most people don't do that. Most people wait again until their discomfort or even their pain is so bad that then they decide they need to do something about it. And then it's an emergency. And then they go to the doctor or the ER, and then they get drugs and all that kind of stuff. and you're not really addressing the underlying thing. So it's about listening to the whispers in your body, not waiting for the screams to start happening.
One of the reasons I love that you're talking about cross mapping with this is cross mapping does teach you to touch in on the whatever's happening that is an undesired state, and then recognizing that I can choose in my body, and to be able to go back and forth and to be able to notice these different states. Because if you're just doing, for example, the core centering practices, I think one of the things that can happen is you think, well, if I'm not centered, it's not good. Like if that's the only option. Whereas when you do course cross mapping, you start to experience there's lots of different experiences in my body that can feel regulated and
Right.
can
Yeah.
feel desired, and gives you more contrast and options. It gives you more options for desired states
Yeah. I love
and
that.
definitely experience. I think that's one of the things that's interesting. Lots of people say listen to the whispers, but I think without the body awareness, and without not just body awareness, like doing body scans sometimes, but actively working
Yeah.
with your sensations, actively working with your body, you don't have that range to be able to really listen to the whispers.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Ani. It's not just about listening to the whispers, it's actually doing something about them. And in cross mapping, that's what you do,
Yeah.
is you learn to consciously shift your internal states again to come back into balance,
Yeah.
right? So it answers kind of the how. How do I get back into balance? Well, I use cross mapping.
Yeah.
That's how you do
It's
it.
really an interesting point.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's just segue into sensation-based motivation coaching, which we do in our level 3 certification program. Again, we're doing this with our clients in our groups all the time, these sorts of things. So this is really where you get in and you change the behavior, where you get underneath the behavior itself and start to change at the sensory level, what's driving the behavior. So when you do these practices, you just start living in more ease and more flow. You just stop fighting life so much, right? You just stop fighting life so much. And I think that's a lot of what we kind of see when you look back at these traits of the people who are in these communities that have longevity practices. They're just not fighting life.
Right.
Like life is in flow. They don't make problems where there's not problems. How many people just make problems where there's not problems?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about technological advances that are supposed to be so spiffy, but actually make us sicker because, for example, we're not moving our bodies. I mean, humans are supposed to interact with their physical surroundings, and then we try to like make things easier, and we actually make things more difficult with a lot of the things that we concoct.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. I mean, I just went off on a little mind trip around
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
It's
me
cool.
too.
Whole thing we could talk about that. But it's not only making life easier and more flow. It's making it easier and more flow with who you really are and who you really want to be. So one of these blue zones, I think it was in Okinawa, if I remember. Yeah, in Okinawa, the I can't pronounce this word, a moas is a group of five friends that in their like when they're 4 or 5 years old, they become committed to living their lives together. So there's these groups of 5 women, like different groups of 5 women who have known each other for 100 years.
That is so cool.
And the
That's
idea
so
is
cool.
they know who each other is at their core
Yeah.
because it is, if you've ever gone to, if you've ever gone to visit anybody on a, like a, as a guest in their house, you can hide who you are for one day. You can hide who you are for 2 days, but after 3 days, everything kind of starts happening, right? And isn't that Benjamin Franklin who said, like, guests and fish after 3 days both start to
Start
stink
to
or
stink,
something
yeah.
like that? But that's true. Like, and when you're in a group of people that you're not familiar with or that you only visit once in a while, after 3 days, like, the real you starts to come out. And sometimes you don't always like that. And you don't always like, oh my God, I realized they were really like that. And it's
Your
just,
quirks and
but after a
stuff.
hundred years,
Yeah.
like you know who those people are.
Yeah.
And there's
So
something
special.
about being recognized as your authentic you. Imagine going through life Stop hiding who you are. Stop trying to be someone else. Stop trying to be someone that someone else wants you to be, and just live in the flow of who you are. Oh, my God, can you just feel the tension come off?
Back to that thing about releasing tension.
Yeah. And so that's really a lot of the work we do with that sensation-based motivation coaching, is helping people to live in the confidence of who they really are. And you work at it at that sensory level, so it gets invested into the subconscious, and you get the subconscious blocks out of the way, and you step into who it is that you're really meant to be, right? And then you can engage with forgiveness and faith and, detachment and all the things that are associated with these groups of people who can, who live past 100 years old, not only living past 100, but being healthy past 100 years old.
Right.
Like, we want to kind of keep coming back to that again and again and again. These are not people who live on pharmaceuticals. These are people who live naturally healthy lives, which I think is just amazing.
It's pretty remarkable.
Just amazing. So, if this is something that's really grabbing you and you're like, God, I want to live longer and I want to live better, then reach out to us, right? There's a lot of ways you can work with us. We can connect you with one of our associate coaches to help you kind of do the work at that level. We have core centering classes. First month's free. Come to the classes, start to work at that level. We have group programs that actually feed into this also. And this topic on longevity, this might be our longest podcast we've ever done.
I was just thinking,
on longevity.
We've been at this for a long time.
We have been, yeah. So it's a good match in that regard too. But this is something I could talk about for a long time.
Should have been a series.
Yeah, it could have been a series, yeah. But I hope that you enjoyed it. Hope that you got a lot out of it. Reach out, share. What else do we want to ask people to do, Ani?
We'll see you next week.
Okay, come back next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself.
Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.